Welcome back to Custom Guns and Reloading. In this video, we are going to discuss how to get started with reloading rifle ammo for less than $230. So I would definitely recommend, if you're just getting started with reloading ammo, before you start spending crazy amounts of money, because you can very easily spend tons of money, I would recommend not spending too much at first just to see if you stick with it. Because reloading ammo can be a very tedious, detail-oriented work. So it's not for everyone, but at the same time, it can save you a little bit of money. It can be very rewarding, and you can tune your ammo to your different rifles. And it mainly, from my perspective, enables you to shoot a lot more. Especially for me out here in California, we have to basically pay a whole extra tax just to get ammo, factory ammo. You can't have that ammo shipped directly to your house. Like every other normal person in the country, we have to get our ammo shipped to an FFL. They have to run a background check, which is another fee for that. And then there's essentially their fee for providing the service. So it's just an extra like $30 or something to get ammo. So that's what mainly inspired me to start learning reloading, is I just refused to pay all this extra money just to get ammo for my guns. So, and again, like I said, it also helps you tune ammo to your individual rifles, which is nice to be able to do. You could also tune your gun to ammo, which is a separate conversation, but I don't want to digress too much there. I would also recommend, when you are starting out, to stick with a simple single stage press. Now you can get into all kinds of fancy turret style presses and progressive presses that are more, I guess, advanced in a way, but stick to single stage presses when you're first starting out, because it'll keep things simple for you and you don't want to add too many variables into the mix. So all this equipment I'm going to cover is an example for what you would need to reload 223 Remington / 5.56 NATO. But the exact same stuff would apply for different calibers, right? You just need to make sure you're getting, when you order the parts, make sure you're getting the parts for that specific caliber and not 223 Remington if you're going a different route there. So with that being said, the first thing actually I don't really technically have on my list is a dollar store plastic container. I think I got all this stuff at the dollar store, the lemon shine and the little thing of dish soap. This is a 11 by 6 by 5. This is I use to clean my ammo. You can get these fancy tumblers and stuff, but again, this technically is not needed. You could wipe each case down with a rag and some alcohol, at least clean the outside of it with that if you want, but this isn't necessarily required, but it's just something I wanted to mention. Okay, that being said, first thing let's cover is the press. And for me, what I started out with was this Lyman Breech lock hand press. I think I got it in a kit. But I'm just recommending just to get the press, because there's certain parts of the kit that I didn't really necessarily like or need. So this press here is $45. Now, on my parts list, I'll create a post and also put this in the description. I'm also going to list things that are sort of optional and or upgrades. But just to get you started for under $230, these are the parts I'm recommending. You'll see a theme here. There's a lot of Lee equipment. Lee is, it's considered like, budget style reloading equipment, but it's solid in its own right. It's not like you're not going to be able to reload ammo with Lee, or if you don't have fancy Redding dies or whatever, or short action customs dies and whatever, Lee will get the job done. It's what I started off with, and it was just fine for me. Now, one thing you could upgrade to once you know that you're going to stick with it is, I upgraded myself to this Lyman Ideal. It's just a C single stage C press, and what I did was I mounted this on like a 6x6 by 1 piece of plastic sheet. And I might just do a whole completely separate video on how I did this, because there's some videos out there that talk about it. Like some people use wood. I used high density polyurethane plastic just because I think it's a little more durable. But yeah, so this is the upgrade on the press. And then again, you could also just upgrade directly to like, RCBS, what's it called? I can't remember. There's a Rock Chucker, there's Redding, there's all kinds of different brands. So anyway, that's what I upgraded to, and I've just been using that. I reload all the way up to 308 Winchester using that, and it's just fine. It has enough clearance. Okay, moving on. The next piece after you have your press is a die set. Now this was a, you have to forgive me because my Lee die set has sort of been missing some parts and stuff. This was a 4-piece die set. I'm recommending just to get the Lee Pacesetter 3 die set. And again, I'll have all these in the description with part numbers and everything. But the Lee Pacesetter 3 die set includes a full-length sizing die, a seating die, a factory crimp die, a powder scooper, a shell holder, which I think, again, like I said, I'm missing mine from here, and 3 smart lock bushings. The smart lock bushings are really nice. I think that's one of these guys. It helps you just quickly change your dies in and out. So you get a bushing for each one of your dies. You just quickly twist it in for, I think it's like maybe like a 90-degree turn, and just swap them in really quickly. So that's what I'm recommending for a die set. To quickly cover what each of those dies are used for, the full length sizing die, it sizes the entire length of your brass. So this is a 6-arc case, but that's what I have on hand. It'll squeeze pretty much all the way down to like around the very bottom of the case. It'll squeeze that back down, because when you fire the brass, it expands out and also lengthens maybe a little bit. So it'll squeeze the circumference of the case back down, and that includes the neck. So it'll squeeze that neck back down, because when you fire that bullet, it expands the neck out for the bullet to leave. And then inside of the full-length sizing die, it also has a decapping pin / expander mandrel. So when you ram it up, it'll squeeze everything down, and then when you pull it out, when you ram it up, it'll squeeze, and then the decapping pin will push the used primer out. And then as you pull it back down, the expander ball will expand the neck back out to the required diameter, because you don't want the neck super, super tight. So it squeezes it way down below your target diameter, and then it'll expand it back out. So that's cool. Sometimes it took me a while to understand exactly everything a full-length sizing die does. It's doing a lot at the same time. Now, you can do some of those steps separately, but when you're just starting out, it just makes sense to just do them all in one shot. It's basically a 3-in-1 type of a die. You could take the expander ball and the decapping pin out, and basically just have the full-length sizing die just size the case and not do the other operations, and you do the other ones separately. So you have a separate decapping die, and you have a separate expander mandrel die and all that stuff. But again, when you're starting off, trying to keep it simple here and cheap. You want it just as cheap as possible, because you don't know if you're even going to stick with it. The next thing you're going to need before you do full-length sizing is some sizing lube. Now, this is pretty cheap. I think you can get this whole thing for $4. I like to use these because you don't necessarily have to worry about the lube degrading the powder. It's okay to get a little bit inside the case. You could also use the Redding sizing die wax, which is sort of the industry standard. Everyone loves those. If you have cases you're really going to be working a lot and you really don't want to stick them, I would use that. But otherwise, you're fine with the Lee. My 4-piece die set is actually missing the full-length sizer, because I unfortunately got a case stuck in it, and it's inexpensive enough where it didn't even make sense for me to spend the shipping to ship it back to them to get the stuck case. I just got a different, I think I got an RCBS or something. But anyway, that's why my 4-piece kit is a missing one. So very important to have some sizing lubricant. One thing just to know, like, you can usually feel it if the case is going to get stuck. Like, if you have to really push hard on it to get the case shoved up into the die, you know it's going to be hard getting out. So usually you can back off before you really get stuck in there. But sometimes it takes experience to know where that threshold is. And unfortunately, I found the threshold on my Lee die, and I got a case stuck. Again, another thing that's optional is a stuck case remover, which I don't think I even have on my list, but it's nice to have one of those on hand. There's also bullet pullers and stuff. Again, optional. You don't need those to get started. So if you actually seat it too deep, or if you're trying to take apart a factory load that you really like, so you can try to clone it and measure the powder and all that, it's nice to have a bullet puller to do that. Okay, moving on. The next piece here is, so an optional thing is also a headspace gauge, which is one of these. This helps you to just drop your size case in there to make sure it's, this is supposed to simulate what your chamber is. So it's supposed to see, like, if you drop the size case in there, it should go pretty much flush, and it has these little indicators here for you to feel. It also has an indicator on the bottom to measure case length. But again, this is not necessarily needed. You definitely need to check your cases before you try to go to the range and shoot them, but you don't need this to do that. All you need is your actual chamber. So for bolt action or gas guns, you take your size case and you have a stripped bolt, and after you size the case, you put it in your chamber and you try to push the bolt in and see if it chambers. So that's how I check, and that's how I recommend doing, because it helps you understand what you're doing as well. The next item here is case prep and trimming. So when you size the cases, sometimes they will also grow in length, and you don't want them to get too long, because then you will have difficulty chambering around, because the case is, your case is too long, and you have to really shove it in there, and you don't want to be doing that. So what I recommend is this, for case prep and trimming, is the Lee Universal Case Conditioning Kit. That's basically this piece here, I think this guy and this, which is a really kind of cheap little chamfer deburr. So you can chamfer with this end and you deburr on the other side here. You push it in there. And then separately from that, this is for the trimming part, is this these two pieces here, which is the, let me see here on my list, Lee case length gauge and shell holder. So this is the one for 223. I actually use these to this day for my trimming. I don't have a fancy, Garrard trimmer and all that, because I'm just still kind of basically on a budget here. You do use these, you can use these by hand. You can also use them in conjunction with a drill. You just chuck this part in a drill. And what you do is you actually screw this part on here, and these two things together is what sort of pinches down and holds your case. You chuck this in the drill, and then you screw. This is like a little, they call it a case length gauge. This is the cutter. You screw this into the cutter, and then this will bottom out on the bottom of this part here. So make sure it sets a pretty repeatable trimming length for you, which is nice. It's within like plus or minus 1/1000th of an inch, I found, so it's very repeatable. And the only caveat to this is it's not adjustable. Like, you can kind of adjust it based on like how far you screw it in, I guess. But I always just I screw it until it bottoms out, and then it's very repeatable for that. So the fancier trimmers, you can adjust, probably about the 1/1000th of an inch if you want. So those are nice, but I've never really felt the need to do that. I just measure my cases after I saw them. If they need trimmed, I trim them. And then when you trim, you also have to chamfer and deburr, because it kind of leaves a little bit of a rough edge around the case of the mouth when you trim it. So that's all the stuff for case prep and trimming. Now, if you want to, I would definitely recommend one of these. It's nice. This is the Lyman case prep multi-tool. These are sort of like what everyone loves. The chamfer on this is perfect. It's the right angle. It's very nice. This is your deburr. And inside it also has some other things like a pocket cleaner, which honestly I never use, but this is like 20 or 30 bucks, and it's a nice little upgrade. Again, not necessarily needed. That little Lee kit that I was talking about kind of gives you everything you need. Okay, moving on. Another optional thing, which I don't have here in front of me, is a military crimp remover. This is mainly if you're trying to reload like NATO brass, like 5.56 NATO brass. The bottom of it, again, this is a 6R case, but I'm just going to use it for demonstrations. You can tell around the primer, there's like a little, I want to call it like an indentation. It's pretty much a crimp that they use to kind of keep the primers in there. And you can tell right away if one has one, because it'll be very hard to see the primer if you don't remove that crimp. And there's a little RCBS tool that you can use to also chuck into a drill and just remove that crimp. There's also a swage tool, which does also work, but I prefer the RCBS, the cutter type, to remove military crimps. Now, speaking of priming, there's a priming tool that Lee has that's called the Ram Prime for their breech lock press. I do have that somewhere laying around. I just don't have it on hand, but it is a $15 priming tool, which is really nice, and you can use it in here on this hand press. And the other thing nice about this hand press is it's portable. You can take this thing wherever you go. Same thing with the way I set this up. This is also portable. You just clamp it down with some C-clamps and you're good to go. So there's the Ram Prime, and an upgrade to that is which I love and I use it all the time, is the RCBS Universal hand priming tool. But that's like 60 bucks. It's not necessarily needed. 60 versus 15. It was an easy choice to include that one as optional. And that's priming. The next one I have on my list is calipers. I have the Hornady 6-inch digital calipers, but the one I have on my list for this post is going to be the Midway 6-inch digital calipers. They're just way cheaper. Not cheaper in quality, but just way less expensive. You're looking at 15 bucks for the Midway digital calipers versus 40 bucks, I think, for the Hornady. You're mainly paying for this label. You can also get some really cheap ones on Amazon or even like Harbor Freight, like the Pittsburgh ones, but the Midway one seems fine. You could also get the analog type calipers, but they're a little bit harder to read, especially when you have a comparator, which is what I'm going to talk about next. Now, technically, you probably don't need, this is called a shoulder bump gauge or a headspace comparator. You technically probably don't need it, but I'm going to say it's just so much easier to figure out your shoulder bumps and stuff with one of these. Because like I said, you don't necessarily need one of these, but because all you need to do is size your brass in your full length sizer, put it in your chamber, and try to close the bolt. And that'll tell you whether or not it's bumped far enough. But this tells you how far you're bumping it, so that when you do it in the future, it just gives you a reference point. So it just makes your life way easier. So I kind of view it as an essential thing to have a shoulder bump. You can also get a bullet comparator, which is a similar thing, but it's actually just the bullet goes into it. So you can measure, instead of measuring just your cartridge overall length, you can also measure the cartridge base to ogive if you have a bullet comparator. That's mainly beneficial if you're shooting a lot of open tip match style bullets, because the tip of those bullets can vary a little bit. And if you're measuring based on the tip to the base, that little bit of variance in the tip can cause, plus or minus 2 or 3 thousandths. So if you use the bullet comparator, it's not measuring it from the tip, it's measuring it from the ogive of the bullet. And no, I don't have a bullet. I was going to show you a bullet so we can explain that, but I'll talk about that later. So that covers comparators. Then another thing, which again isn't necessarily needed, is a reloading tray. These are just really nice because they help to hold your ammo. Here, I'll show you the 6-arc one here. See how that's just holding all your brass? Mainly needed for when you are throwing your powder and charging your cases with powder. Otherwise, you'd have to hold it by hand and like hold the funnel at the same time and kind of try to pour your powder. You're just going to make a mess and it's going to frustrate you, and you're probably just going to give up on it. So these are inexpensive enough for it. I view it as a required item. Just makes your life much easier. I think these Frankfurt Perfect Fit reloading trays you can get a 2-pack for $11. I mean, it's easy to do that and be done. The other thing too is a powder funnel. Now they have like universal ones, like this plastic one, which again I think came with I got my hand press as part of the hand press kit, and it came with this funnel. And these are okay in a pinch if you need to. They'll fit anything from like a 22 all the way up to a 308. But you can see here, it's not very tight fit. It's kind of sloppy. You will probably lose some powder and make more of a mess. So you can get one of these if you want. Same thing with the reloading trays. You can get the universal size reloading trays where you like flip it over and have different stuff. I just like these ones. They're specific to a family of cases. You see here on the side, it's 223 Remington /204 Ruger /300. So similar to that, I like to have case-specific funnels. You can see this is a Saturn 22 caliber funnel. I also have one for 6mm and one for 30 caliber. Here's the 6mm one. So they just fit nice and square and tight on the mouth of the case. So it helps prevent you from just making a mess. And final is a scale of some sort. Now, I found this scale to be really nice. This is a Smartway Gem 20. It actually measures down to 1/100th of a grain, which is pretty small. So it's two decimals. I'm gonna turn this on so you can see it. So yeah, this is $30-something. The caveat to these are they will drift on you a little bit. So you have to be careful with these digital scales. Even the nice ones. I have a Hornady one, which was way more expensive than this one, and actually floated around more than this. So I use this in conjunction with this RCBS beam scale, which is a 502. So I sort of do a double check. You really kind of only need one or the other. If I would push people one way or the other, I would actually suggest the beam scale, because there's just less stuff to worry about with those. But no matter which one you choose, I would definitely recommend a check weight, a set of check weights, definitely for one of these. But this is a couple different brands. I think Lyman makes some. These are the RCBS check weights. These are about $30-$35. These just help make sure you don't blow your face off, right? You want to calibrate and check, not for calibration. There's separate weights that you use to calibrate these, but these are to check that your output is correct and accurate. They have 5 grain, 20 grain, etc. So what I like to do is, let's say I'm loading, 25 grains of powder. I'll turn this on. I will grab a 20 grain check weight and a 5 grain, throw it in there, and it should be very close to 25 on here or here. So definitely needed. The other thing that is optional is a powder trickler. I definitely would recommend one because they're not really all that expensive. It's $20. I like the Frankfurt ones. You just want one that has a little bit of beef to it, so it's not going to get knocked over and stuff. But these are for just fine trickling a little bit. But if you're really dexterous with your fingers, you can kind of fine trickle with a scooper and just kind of tap it. And if your scale is precise enough and sensitive enough, you'll pick it up. And the beam scales definitely are. You can tap it on there, or it'll pick it up when you use the trickler. But I have the trickler listed as an optional. So everything here together, as I said, is $229. So you can get started with reloading for less than $230. These were examples for 223 Remington, but you can apply it to whatever cartridge you're loading for here. So that's it for this video. I might actually do my next video just following my reloading steps. So I already have I'm doing some reloading for 6-arc gas gun, so I might just follow along as I do that. So we will have some reloading content coming here on the channel. All right, thanks everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.